I like to do this one every January because I figure I'm going to strike the iron while it's hot. A lot of people are motivated again, right? And we're going to really go for it. But honestly, I was reminded of my dad. He was a minister. He's now passed on. And I was thinking about him, how he has to bring the Christmas message every year. And I also admired how he put a different spin on it. I have it much easier because research just keeps on expanding. We're talking about doubling of research every 16 months as far as knowledge goes. So I did the math, and since I graduated, only about 7% of the things that I learned in graduate school is still true today. So now the basics stay the same, right? I mean, this is a biceps muscle, that's not going to change. But I'm talking about some of the applications of how we do things, and that's pretty astonishing when you think about it. So make sure you check up on your doctors, make sure they're really keeping up with the research. This is absolutely important, and I can tell you, I can vouch for us doctors, and we have Dr. Stacy in the back, Dr. Kate in the back, that they travel and keep up with the research and just pound it. And we have meetings every Wednesday. We call that our roundtable discussion, where patient cases get discussed, research gets discussed, all kinds of weird things get thrown out. And I'm sometimes glad our conversations don't get recorded because we could be the laughing stock at times. Lots of humor, but it's really important for your physician to do that. So let's get rolling on this lifelong weight loss seminar. You'll notice pretty quick here that this is not only about weight loss, but about getting healthy. So we're going to go through the causes of weight gain and action plans. Number 2, we're going to figure out our next seminar. That's going to be an exciting one. And I want to remind you about our Nature's Remedies monthly newsletter. This one has just exploded as far as how many people receive this, and that's because we write our research articles, everything that's current in health. It's very seasonal appropriate oftentimes, and any new product, research updates, and that's what we do for keeping you informed. You know the functional medicine model? Some of you have been here, some of you have not, so I'll explain this briefly. But in order to be a functional medicine doctor, you basically have to be a specialist in all fields. Endocrinology, cardiology, gastroenterology, orthopedics, the list goes on and on. And when you get certified in functional medicine, the final testing that you take is basically questions taken from all those board exams from those different specialties. And the reason for that is that everything is interconnected to everything, and you all know that, but the doctors don't. Somewhere along the line, we have lost our common sense in school, and I don't know how that happens. It's the first year medical students, 90% of them will have want to incorporate nutrition in their practice. That, by the time they graduate, number has dwindled to single digits. Something happens in there. And I keep on checking. I have someone that I'm very close to that is currently going through an oncology program in med school, and I keep checking. So we're now in our 3rd year. How many nutrition classes have you really had? 0. Most of my patients know more about nutrition than their doctors do. And that is a crying shame. So nutrition really is the common line in all these things. It is so important. It affects the OBGYN, the cardiology, the gastroenterology, which then also affects weight loss. So we're going to cover this, and that's why I said this is going to be a confusing mess, because I'm going to cover a lot of these things. But before we dive into that, I'd like to give you a research update from last year. There's a couple of startling statistics that was published. One is our obesity epidemic is now at 35% of the population. The overweight class is over 70%. Okay, we're talking very startling statistics. More than 50% of the American adults are now pre-diabetic or diabetic. This is a crisis of monumental proportions. 1/3 of our kids are now pre-diabetic or diabetic. Half of our kids are expected to have full-blown diabetes by the age 40. These are just sobering statistics. You would think that we get confronted by statistics like that we would really examine ourselves. Hey, what's going on here? But it reminds me of that saying is where you heat up the water, the frog is in the water, you heat it up slowly and it never jumps out because it gets used to it, and that's the new norm. It reminds me a little bit of the autistic syndrome epidemic that's out there now. When I started practice, 1 in 22,000 kids. Now it's 1 in 88. Right? It's actually related to the obesity epidemic and some of the other things that are happening. So that is one very sobering statistic, which is why I'm bringing you this seminar with a bit of a weight on my shoulders, because this is such an important topic that affects every one of us. Even if we don't have this obesity within us ourselves, there's a lot of us that are skinny but are still pre-diabetic or maybe even diabetic. And those people are even worse off than those that are overweight or obese, health-wise. Isn't that interesting? So that was one thing. And the other thing that was published that was a little bit startling is that exercise doesn't do that much for obesity. Now, I hate saying that because you all know that I'm sort of fanatic about exercise. But the thing is, this is the problem with research. It takes just one facet and studies it. It doesn't put the whole thing together. And if all you do for being overweight is exercise, no, it's not going to make that much of a difference. However, I can also tell you, those people that don't exercise can lose weight but never keep it off. That's just personal experience here. Because muscle mass, as was explained last seminar when we did the seminar on aging well, which by the way is available online. In that seminar we explained that the fountain of youth really is muscle mass. And why did we call it the fountain of youth? It's because when you increase muscle mass, you get reversal of aging, decrease in inflammation, and on it goes. In fact, we have just gotten studies this past year from McMaster University that shows that telomeres, which is the sign of aging, actually reverses with exercise as long as it's muscle building. As long as it's muscle building. Okay? So this is the very first time that we've been able to demonstrate reversal of cellular aging. Not using a drug, not using some fancy nutraceutical, but plain old exercise. So it's still a critical component, but it showed that it by itself is not enough. The genetic component was also studied. And this one comes out of Southwest Ontario in London. And this study shows that the genetic component towards obesity is only about 20%. 80% of it is lifestyle, folks. What we do. If you have a father or mother that were more obese, yes, you're going to be have a slightly more proclivity towards becoming obese. But what's probably happening more is that you've inherited some of their habits. And everything we do is kind of, we compare it to the scale of where we used to be, isn't it? And maybe that's not good enough at times. So that was a pretty major finding because a lot of this used to be blamed on genetics. Another important study showed that if you're born by C-section, your chance of becoming obese is doubled. Along with some other things. Autism rates increase dramatically. Gastrointestinal disturbances increase dramatically. Autoimmune disease incidence increase dramatically if you are born by C-section. Okay, the reason for that is that our microbiome, the bacteria that live in our gut, which controls so much of us, we inherit from our mother, passing through the birth canal. And if you don't pass through the birth canal, you don't get that. Instead, you get all the weird bugs from the hospital and whatever doctor touches you and the nurses and all that. And that's what you're stuck with, folks. Which is why probiotics are becoming so critical in the study of obesity. So, interesting things that are being revealed, and we're going to dive in how to apply some of those things. I'm going to cover a bunch of factors, and they're going to seem like they're all weird and separate. They're all connected. The first thing that I want you to know about is mitochondrial malfunction. This was first studied in the 1950s. Now, what is mitochondria? Mitochondria is this little organelle that resides within the cell, and it produces our energy for us. So whether you're a nerve cell, liver cell, skin cell, doesn't matter. We all have mitochondria that fuels it. So mitochondrial function is absolutely critical to life. And I can tell you that a lot of my very chronically ill patients that come into me, mitochondrial function has slowed down to a crawl. So almost anything that comes in, that is chronic and inflammatory, you could call a mitochondrial disease or mitochondrial syndrome of some sort. Okay? It is the end result, and it's a little bit like somebody threw sand in the gears and things are just not working well. This is a really important one. This is also the reason, and I want you to really take note here, that if you're going to bring about some of the changes that we're going to talk about tonight, folks, you have to give this 12 weeks before you start seeing significant change. If it's as simple as just overeating, which most cases of obesity is not, then you're going to see more quick results. But that's a very minor percentage. You've got to give 12 weeks because we're talking about health restoration here in order to get your weight down, get your weight normalized. So mitochondrial function is really important. Next slide we're showing is what we use here in order to get things back. You're going to get a bunch of nutraceuticals all in a row here. It's all going to sound confusing. I'm going to tie it together with the all-important food at the end. Okay, exercise and food, because that's really the hallmark. But these are the little turbochargers we use in order to make it happen quicker. Yeah, because just your food alone with these people is no longer enough. They're malnourished, they're undernourished, and it takes an extra push to get some of these bodily functions going. And to do that, we use coenzyme Q10 that's been stabilized, clinically researched, all of these are, and Mito5, which is medicinal powder, all plant-based, that fuels up mitochondria. We, by the way, also do this for our professional athletes that want to really get their reflex time up. They want to get their muscle building up. They need mitochondria. They need that energy for extra recovery, and we'll put them on that. In fact, I remember quite a while ago, we had a stock car driver that was quite well known, and this guy took 3 of these before every race because he claimed it sharpened his brain and his reflexes, gave him the energy to do what he was supposed to do in a race. And that's really what got me on the research bandwagon, is how would that affect it? And sure enough, where do we have most of the mitochondria in our body? In the nervous system. So therefore we now also use it for things like Alzheimer's and cardiac issues, because the heart muscle also has a lot of mitochondria. But a lot of patients who have been obese or overweight for a long time have very slow mitochondrial function. Number 2, nutritional imbalance. What we have is a major problem in the US, where we are overfed but undernourished. And nowhere can you see that more than those living at or below the poverty line. Isn't that right? It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Where you see in the old paintings from the old Dutch masters, you see those that were very wealthy, they were just a big people, right? That was the sign of wealth. It seems like things have reversed, right? Where those that are now the poorest are the biggest. Now, why would that be? Well, we all know the answer. They're the ones that are eating the most processed food because it's easy, and educationally maybe they haven't had the education, and maybe there's less access to things like farmers markets. It's a complex problem. It's multifactorial. But another reason for this is also the fact that economically, the profit margin on processed foods is 90%. 90. This is why you see so much advertising and the attractive packaging and all that. Farmers market foods, the produce, profit margin, 10%. This is why when I go to the farmer's market and I give somebody this much for broccoli, so I'll keep the change, because I know it's only 10% that they're getting. This is part of the reason, it's just pure economics, that we have such a discrepancy in our food chain. And there's articles being written and awareness is being done and education is being done. But unless that changes somewhat, things aren't going to change too quickly, because we all know how that goes with economics. And I can point many fingers. That's not my job right now, the lobby groups and the government regulations with the farms, and that's a whole other topic, okay? But the thick and thin of it is, those foods that come in a box from a plant is out there to destroy your health. They are so undernourished, nutrition is taken out, that they have to put it back in, fortified with blah, 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 blah. That's how empty it is. U of M did a study, and this one is somewhat humorous, on cereals and its effect on rats. So they fed them, and as a joke, they at the same time selected another group, they fed in the box. Guess who did the best? That's right. The ones that ate on the box. It was at least somewhat plant-based. Isn't that just terrible when you think about it? So every time you eat that convenient, cheaper food, it really is more expensive, isn't it? It's costing you your health, it's costing you economically, and it's costing the country a lot. So we need to get back to plant-based foods, the real deal. I sometimes get, well, doc should be organic, this organic. You know what? Even the ones that are grown in crappy conditions with herbicides and all, and maybe soil that isn't the best, and maybe long shipping distances, is still going to totally outperform what's in the box. So let's first worry about switching over to mostly plants, and then start worrying about density of nutrients by getting more organic and more colors and the rainbow diet, we like to call that. And they say, well, I don't like it. Well, start liking it. It's, that's how we treat our kids too, right? And your taste buds will adapt, and eventually you start craving it, and you can't wait to have that meal. I couldn't wait to get home for lunch today. Had a kale salad with some arugula through it, and I had some salmon on it. I did that with just a little bit of olive oil with a little lemon squeezed on it. I want you to know, it was absolutely delicious. Had that with a little bit of tea, done. Quick walk afterwards, and good to go. That's fuel. That is fuel. Versus sliding by some McDonald's and loading, no. Yeah, so that's the way to do it. And time that it cost, hardly any. And actual cost wasn't that bad either. Now I know salmon is a little bit more expensive than most, but I thought I was worth it. Yeah? So, nutritional imbalance, action plan. Get that food going. The anti-inflammatory diet I'm going to cover at the end. Very critical. Nutraceuticals that we use. Yes, I do some convenience things. Ultrameal Plus 360 is nutrient-laden, all plant-based, published in 7 different medical journals as far as how well it works and renourishing. And it also helps with balancing sugar. That's actually what it's meant for first. And phytoganics, 1 tiny little scoop equals 8 pounds of organic fruits and vegetables. This is how I re-nourish our patients. This is how us doctors re-nourish patients that need re-nourishing. Allergy and intolerance. This is a big one, folks. As our gut health has declined the last few generations, we estimate that the diversity of the gut microbiome, the bacteria that live us, that control us, that outnumber us 10 to 1 cells-wise, that control not only digestion, but your immune system, your neurotransmitters, your moods, your hormones, all those things. The diversity of our gut has declined by 70% in the previous 2 generations, which means that we're much less resilient. We break down our foods less effectively. And it has started to affect the gut wall. It has now become more leaky. Leaky gut syndrome is now become a normal term. When we were first using it over a quarter century ago in this office, people are going, that really sounds weird. That's not a real term. And because internet wasn't around, yep. People tried to research, and there wasn't really much out there, but Dr. Metchnov back in 1908 first coined the term, published it, and proved that it was right. It was rather unfortunate that with the formation of the AMA that term got thrown out and said that's baloney, there's nothing to it, and on it went. I was at a symposium in Los Angeles about 5 years ago where they were covering the gut. The gastroenterologist, it was some gastroenterologist from one of the Ivy League schools was presenting there. And they said, they were casually mentioning leaky gut syndrome. I about fell off my chair. It is now common. Everybody's saying it again. I'm allowed to say it again. And this leaky gut syndrome is what's behind a lot of these sensitivities that we have developed. Because if your gut is more leaky than it should be, it's going to allow into the bloodstream undigested food particles or new to man molecules that are found in processed foods. And folks, your immune system goes crazy when that happens. It says, we have a foreigner in our bloodstream. I don't like it. I'm going to mount an inflammatory response, which is systemic. And depending on your predisposition, it's going to go somewhere. For me, it might be my knee. For my grandma, it would have been her brain. She passed on from Alzheimer's. For one of my uncles, it would have been his heart, right? So it goes to wherever you're more prone to having issues. And it slows down metabolism on everyone, making you much more likely to gain weight. And the cells that are most responsive to inflammation fat-wise, right here. So the apple gut is a sign of inflammation. This is why the apple gut is related to stroke and cardiovascular death incidence 2.5-fold compared to the population. And believe me, the statistics of our population is not that great. So 2.5 times is quite a wake-up call. So food sensitivities is huge. And the ones that we've become most food sensitive to, dairy, because of all the things we have done to it. Gluten, because of all the things we've done to it. Soy, because of all the things we've done to it. Right, the genetic modification. In fact, when the genetically modified soy was introduced in Britain about 12 years ago, they pulled it off the market after just 1 year because emergency room visits had doubled. We're still stuck with it, by the way. Yeah? And corn. And citrus tends to be a problem for a lot of people too. Guess what we do with the anti-inflammatory food plan? We pull those out. And guess what happens? Bloating, fluid retention, weight starts dropping, muscle starts building, hormones rebalance themselves, brain fog disappears. And gasp, autoimmune inflammatory disorders start improving dramatically. So, big one. So what do? Elimination diet. And we pull in IgG Health. These are immunoglobulins that line the gut. This is made from colostrum. And this is what we get the first 3 days of life with breastfeeding. This is what turns on the lights in the gut, folks, in the baby, immune system-wise. This is what turns on the lights. So IgG Health mimics that to try to restart what we have lost. Glutacor is L-glutamine and deglycerized licorice with a little bit of zinc and vitamin A. Vitamin A, I get a lot of questions on. Research out of England shows that vitamin A is absolutely is critical for rebuilding the gut wall. And without it, you're often not successful. So that's what we do with that one, and a probiotic. I kept the probiotic generic because there's so many of them. We have video blog series on probiotics online if you want to educate yourselves on that. Fourth factor that we check when somebody comes in with obesity. See, I'm trying to categorize them, right? Some people are more into the nutritional imbalance, some people are more in inflammation, some people are more of the methylation. The methylation epigenetics is the one that's most difficult to talk about. It's a little bit of an esoteric topic. We've been at the cutting edge of methylation since we first discovered it about 12 years ago. And methylation is simply attaching a methyl group to something to turn it on or off. So if you're methylating a neurotransmitter, you're turning it on or off. If you're methylating a hormone, you're turning it on or off. If you're methylating a gene, you're turning it on or off. And this is where it gets really important, because no methylation, all your bad genes will start telling a horror story. We all have bad genes in us, don't we? We sure do. So we can make them tell a horror story, or we can make them tell us a beautiful fairy tale. Right? You can tell with the Native Americans, today they are being told a horror story health-wise by genetic expression because their environment has changed so dramatically. Right? Alcoholic, very diabetic kind of foods. They're getting government foods and they're not eating the wild game that they used to. So their stature has shortened. They've gotten wider this way. Average lifespan is less than 50 years of age. Right? It's just a genetic expression due to change in methylation that has changed them from 100 years ago, where we're tall, lanky, long-living, and happy. Same genes, different expression. So methylation is a critical thing that has really started pounding our health in the last 30 years especially, and this is what's behind partially the obesity epidemic. We can no longer methylate away all the toxins, the plastics, the pollutants that are in our environment. We can no longer balance our hormones, which is so critical for our health. We can no longer turn on neurotransmitters like we should, which is affecting anything from Parkinson's, MS, Alzheimer's, and mood disorders, right? This is a methylation problem. And it is driven by folic acid for the most part. Now, not folic acid, because that is a synthetic vitamin. Like 95% of the vitamins on the market are synthetic, and folks stay away from those because they have side effects, which is why you'll see all kinds of studies. A multivitamin doesn't make a difference in health, right? It's because they're studying synthetic vitamins. Vessel Care is your all-natural, plant-based B vitamin called folate, and a precursor to that called 5-tetrahydrofolate, which your body can manufacture into exactly what it needs. Even those people who have the genetic tendency of not being able to absorb folic acid or folate can absorb this one, which allows them to start methylating. So if somebody comes in with obesity, we give them this methylated B vitamin, but we also use it for hormone issues, neurotransmitter issues, right? The list goes on. And a Phytomulti, which also has these methylated B vitamins in it to get things going. Fifth factor related to obesity. He says, is he going to end? There's a few more, sorry. Toxicity and neurotoxicity. If you check blood, fetal blood, so we're talking not even born yet, on average they'll have 91 plus toxic chemicals present. It's really sad. We're seeing the same thing. I saw a study on little baby polar bears in the North Pole, and they had an average of over 121 chemicals, and there's no plants spewing chemicals over there, and right, it's really become an incredible issue. And some of these chemicals are present in very small quantities. But you remember DDT, right? Incredibly effective at getting rid of mosquitoes. Now we know that just a tiny quantity is passed on even to the third generation, affecting reproductive health. Some of us may remember the drug DES. It's a very weak estrogen drug that was used to combat morning sickness and to save babies from miscarriage. This was back in the late 50s, early 60s. We now know that it is measurable in the third generation, affecting the risk of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and reproductive health in the third generation. See, these chemicals get carried through. And if the succeeding generation that's being born is a little bit weaker than the generation before it, it's going to have a much more profound effect. Which is part of the reason that we see our kids today having the obesity problem. It's part of the reason. And it's also part of the reason that they are expected to live less long than this generation. Which, by the way, is the first time ever in history accepting major world wars. So, toxicity is all around us. It is rather depressing. We have plastics in the environment, which has become a major issue. We have Lake Michigan. The mercury issue there is still huge from the 1970s, where we're still trying to clean that up. We have air pollutants. I can go on and on. I don't want to make this a depressing tale. So what do? You can't put yourself in a little bubble. Do you know if you took one serving of broccoli, it doubles liver output for 36 hours? Phenomenal. If you have some Brussels sprouts, it acts as a prebiotic on your microbiome, which cleans up a lot of that stuff, measurable for 4 days. This stuff is golden. It is absolutely golden. Profit margin on that should be 90%. So what do? We apply the DBC Detox, which is a more extended detoxification program. It goes on for 4 days. It's guided by our health coaches, where you meet once a week, and we change up the system, the diet plan for every week, and based on the patient's symptoms, and it's closely monitored with the BIA. And we use a medical food called Ultra Clear Renew, or Ultra Clear Plus pH. And these medical foods, they're allowed to be called medical foods because they've been trialed with clinical trials. We know how they work. We see them being used in hospitals and healthcare settings, really worldwide. And that is the workhorse. It measurably increases liver function permanently, measurable within just days. So most detoxification plans fail because, one, they're very goofy. They're not designed for the individual. There's some crazy ones out there, as you well know. But number two, they don't allow the body to bind to the toxins that are being released to allow them to expel. So it's almost like taking a blower to clean your garage out and not opening up the garage doors, right? You're just creating this dust that you're blowing away, but it has nowhere to go. So what's keeping us doctors here at DBC quite busy, honestly, is detox programs gone wrong and a chronic disease, chronic illness. I've never quite been the same doc. We hear that one a lot, resulting from that. So to do this in a guided way, I feel is absolutely critical, and this is where a lot of the doctoring takes place. Now, can I do some detox on my own? Well, of course, you can follow, let's get this diet totally cleaned up, and let's drink more water and maybe extra lemon, and right, there's a lot of things you can do that way as well, because food is always the main vehicle that we start with. Nutraceuticals then is the Ultra Clear Renew, and MetalloClear, if we through urine analysis detect heavy metals, quite a problem, especially with neurological problems. The mitochondrial fatigue often has a heavy metal issue behind it, brain fog. Heavy metals has become a major problem and impediment to proper metabolism for weight loss. Inflammation. This is one that's been subject to so much publicity, and I'm so thrilled because it is behind almost every major disorder out there, especially weight issues. Anyone who's 30 pounds or more overweight, show me one of them that's not inflamed. They are all inflamed. And why is that? Well, part of it is maybe the lifestyle that got them there in the first place. Okay? Also, what happens to fat? When the percentage of fat as we measure it on a bioimpedance analysis, climbs over 30%, it's like a switch happens. Fairly friendly, innocuous fat that gives us our shape, our reserves for making hormones, and is good for protecting the nervous system. So fat is good. But once it climbs over a specific amount, all of a sudden it turns inflammatory on you. It is amazing to watch the transformation. It becomes evil, angry fat that 24/7 spews out inflammatory molecules that affect us systemically, slowing down your metabolism, your will to exercise, ability to sleep, hormones, on and on it goes. It even changes color. It goes from brownish color, which means it's loaded with mitochondria, which means it's active, to kind of a whitish, grayish color. And I remember being shown that in graduate school. And that evil fat is jiggly and less firm, and it just isn't attractive even. So, yeah, I won't get too descriptive here. I saw some people shudder. So inflammation becomes a huge impediment. So this is why the anti-inflammatory food plan that we're going to outline a bit at the end is going to be so critical for these people. But as far as nutraceuticals, one of the more powerful ones out there are these two. They both are subject to intense research. The originator of this has been approached for a Nobel Prize next year for his work. Okay? Harvard led a team of 20 scientists, been working on this for about 20 years, has been published multiple times in medical journals on how resolvins resolves chronic inflammation. We always thought that inflammation just disappears when you clear out the original problem. True, when it's an acute situation, but when a chronic inflammatory process has gone on too long, we run out of the ability to resolve it. That's why the compounds that resolve chronic inflammation have been called resolvins. These are compounds that are secreted by red and white blood cells. It's a cascade of events and can be activated by this extract. It's been patented, and I have seen dramatic change in inflammation with it. Absolutely dramatic. It's been a game changer. Along with that, Inflammex, which is a medical food, again been subject to the clinical trials, has a new kind of turmeric in it, and this turmeric is bound to fenugreek. 17% of it is fenugreek, which activates it so that it's 45 times as anti-inflammatory as regular turmeric. Now we have a major player. And we can reverse things. I've seen things like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, dry eye syndrome. I can go on all the things that get improved by it, and has now become a major way for us to reduce weight because we're reducing inflammation. The 360 part is the proprietary number for extract of hops, because we know xanthohumulin, which is the hop extract that's in there, activates insulin receptors and gets rid of the insulin resistance that is so common with the apple-shaped gut and inflammation, which leads us to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, or metabolic syndrome, or it used to be called Syndrome X, is what 50% or more of us have, even if you don't have a weight issue. Insulin is a wonderful hormone that regulates our sugar levels, absolutely critical. But when we secrete too much of it too long, in other words, we have Pop-Tarts with Coca-Cola for breakfast, right? I know I'm being extreme. Too many carbs. It's actually true for some, I'm afraid. And just an imbalanced, high calorie, low nutrient diet, too much stress, hormonal imbalance, all those things, insulin resistance will occur. What happens? Well, insulin is this beautiful hormone that if there's a sugar that's coming along in the bloodstream, the body has a signal saying, okay, I got to get that sugar over to the brain because the brain needs it right now. Yeah, we're doing some pretty major math problems. So insulin gets secreted by the pancreas, rushes over, and attaches itself to the cell. And the cell, this is the cell receptor, and then what happens is the cell door opens, sugar goes in, and it gets metabolized for energy by the mitochondria and such. Insulin, now let's say we do this a lot. There's a lot of sugar. Now we have to get a whole bunch of insulin all the time. And it's a little bit like if you nag your kids too much, yes, I have 5 kids, they stop listening, right? It's this funny phenomena. And the same thing with insulin. So if you get too much insulin going over here all the time, stops listening. That's insulin resistance. Now sugar starts going up and down. It gets stored right over here, the fat, right? That's a cardinal sign of insulin resistance. Patient becomes more inflamed because at that level, insulin is very inflammatory. It's no longer friendly. And whatever the patient has issues with, it will become the problem. In fact, this might be one of the top 2 causes of Alzheimer's. Not might be, we are very sure of it. Okay? Back in Europe, we are calling Alzheimer's diabetes of the brain. We know what causes these inflammatory disorders. We just have failed to act on it. It drives me crazy because we know this stuff. So, insulin receptors need to be normalized. How do you do that? Well, you can do it somewhat by following the Mediterranean diet. I've seen the studies, and you can kind of keep things stable, but you have to work a little harder, and that's why we've designed boot camp. And our health coaches do a phenomenal job getting our patients' insulin receptors back on track. In order to accomplish this, you have to go up and above and beyond normal changes for a while before moderating things again. So we make sure there's absolutely no excess sugar release going on into the blood. And we activate the insulin receptors with a very well documented product called Ultrameal 360 and Insugene, which that combination in 12 weeks can accomplish more than what the Mediterranean diet can accomplish in 4 years. And that's been published. So we've come to the era now that nutraceuticals are outperforming drugs, because the best we can do with drugs is something like metformin, which at best can stabilize. This can actually reverse, which is pretty cool. But notice every time I say this, these nutraceuticals should be accompanied rather with food changes. That is absolutely a critical component here. This is not going to work with Coca-Cola. Okay, just 2 more to go, guys. Hang in there. Microbiome. Gut-brain dysfunction. Currently, there's really an active research going on, and we're getting really close, maybe even this year, on developing probiotics that will combat obesity. Why? In the Netherlands, a University of Amsterdam, they've been doing trials where someone who's obese and their sibling is not, we can take the bacteria from their gut, implant it in the obese patient, and in 2 weeks or less, their pre-diabetes is gone. And they start losing weight like mad. The clinical trials have only gone on for 3 months. It's very recent, was just presented at Harvard as of a month ago. And I can't wait to see the long-term results in this. But we know that at the very least, the gut microbiome has an incredible effect on obesity. If we can affect weight without lifestyle changes just by doing a transplant of gut bacteria, that means something. We've done it with mice already for years. And now we've got human trials. I suspect that effect would only last so long because, again, lifestyle has got to is what changes the gut microbiome. So maybe the calories is not quite as important as what the food is doing to your gut microbiome. Huge factor. So in order to try to get this rolling, oh, and by the way, there's an incredible connection between the gut and the brain. Yeah? This is your second brain. Just the colon alone houses 92% of your serotonin levels. By far more than the brain has. That's your happy hormone. Happy neurotransmitter, rather. Yeah, it's pretty huge. So therefore, when this is off, this is going to be off. There goes your willpower. There comes cravings. Forget about exercise. I'm mildly depressed. Obesity. There's a very strong link here. So, you remove the offending foods as well as the offending bugs. So we use nutraceuticals and use foods. You replace with appropriate probiotic and re-inoculate with appropriate probiotic. You replace the digestive enzymes that have been lost because they're overworked. We estimate now at age 50, we have less than 50% of digestive enzymes left compared to when we were 20. It's a little depressing. And at the end, and this is a critical phase that often gets forgotten, you repair the intestinal lining, otherwise you end up with the same problem over again. To do that, we use a lot of prebiotic foods such as tomatoes, artichokes, onions, garlic, chicory, dandelion greens also helps the liver a lot. Asparagus is a huge one, leeks. Berries, now we're talking mostly blackberries as well as blueberries and a little bit strawberries. Bananas, but watch this one, folks. Buy them a little bit green. It has a quarter of the sugar in it. And any fruit that is tropical tend to be sugar bombs. So for example, in boot camp, we don't allow this one. Yeah, but it is good for the gut. Flaxseed and legumes. This fiber is made from 24 different plant sources and is a prebiotic and kills bad bugs. And the last thing, but not the least, that we consider when somebody comes in, when they come in with obesity, is how are their hormones doing? Is the thyroid off? Most of us know that yes, that causes obesity, weight gain. What are the cardinal signs? Dry skin, always being cold, hair falling out, constipation, right? Very thyroid related. We think that 50% of women over 50 have undiagnosed thyroid issues because it doesn't show up the labs. The labs are normal. Well, what if, just like insulin, if your insulin amount is right, but your body is not responding to it, maybe the same thing can be happening to your thyroid hormone. It's measuring okay in your blood, but it's not measuring the action. This is why we're called functional medicine. How is it functioning? Does that make sense? So that, sometimes you've got to treat the patient, not the labs. You've got to listen to the patient's symptoms, because that can be more important than the labs. Labs are valuable, we use them, but it's not the holy anointed oil that shows everything. So hormonal imbalance is huge. The thyroid is connected to your adrenals. Anybody here have stressed adrenals? Right? Some of us are maybe a little frazzled, especially post-holiday, but we're talking there can be emotional issues, toxic stress from family stress, business, job that just isn't working out like it's supposed to, just too much of everything. And honestly, you can stress out your adrenals just by getting into the trap of looking at that flickering screen, whether it's TV or your phone, iPad, what have you, and it's on non-stop. You are just bombing yourself with a stress that you don't need. You're just bombing it. I sometimes walk into my treatment room and patients waiting. They're just busy on the screen all the time. And I'm thinking, ouch. How about just sitting there and quietly contemplating? That's why we have windows in our treatment rooms, right? Natural light. So there's something to be said about creating islands of peace. If that be prayerful meditation, walking, if that be yoga, there's all kinds of ways for us to do that. And some of us, it's silly. I find waxing the card actually to be very relaxing. It sounds really silly. But everybody does their own thing, right? So the action plan is to support the thyroid as well as adrenals. Adrenal 5 is a very classic functional medicine kind of problem because it affects the pituitary, thyroid, and adrenals all at the same time because it works as a group. Estrogen balances hormones, excess estrogen production, inflammatory estrogen. And honestly, I could have put up 30 things here. I just chose a couple. Here comes exercise, the one that I said didn't work. As I also said, I've not seen any success without exercise. Now, why would that be? It's because exercise hits inflammation, hits mitochondrial fatigue, balances hormones. It does all of the things that we have talked about in a very positive way. Shoot, it even reverses age, as I talked about. The exercise must include, besides cardiovascular, muscle building. And I'm not talking about hitting 5-pound weights. I'm talking maxing it out. It can be only 10 minutes twice a week. We're going to do a seminar next time on DBC Fit, which is opening downstairs, a gym, and we're going to give you some of the basics on muscle building. But muscle building, its effects are tripled or quadrupled if you combine it with cardiovascular, as long as it's interval training. And I've seen studies that was published in this past year also that finally gave me the answer. I was always wondering how, on average, and nobody's average, I know, but it's a starting point. How much cardiovascular training does it take for maximum health benefits? I'm not talking about races or being extraordinarily fit for some big hike, just for health. 2 miles of interval training twice a week. This could be a walk where you go into a mile. It depends on your fitness level, right? Some of us that are very fit, it means hitting it pretty hard for 2 miles. Others, it's just a more gentle, where it's the, one of our favorites, us DBC doctors here, is 30-20-10 rule, 30-second walk, 20-second jog, and 10-second sprint. And if you are 95 years old, of course you're not going to do that. But you can walk at 3 different levels of speed. Or you can go on a stationary bike at 3 different levels of speed using that 30-20-10 rule. You really have to get real about it too. Really be honest with yourself, because it's amazing how the gyms just fill up in January. By February rolls around, they're half empty again, right? Do something that's really sustainable, that you know you're going to be doing at the end of the year yet. I'd rather that you okay, this I can do instead of doing this crazy thing out here. And if it's 10 minutes of exercise in the morning, it shows that morning exercisers, 70% of them are still doing it at the end of the year, versus evening exercisers, a little less than 24% are actually still doing it at the end of the year. So maybe morning is best for you, but perhaps you have to get up at 3:30 in the morning for some crazy shift that you're working. Maybe morning is not the best time. Everybody's different. You got to do your thing as long as you're doing it and you're doing it consistently. Exercise is not an option. It's a must. And if you can't find 10 to 15 to 20 minutes in your day to do this, you have to reinvent your life. Really. We're talking 1 to 2% of your day. And you're going to get it back so quickly. I try to sell my patients on a 20-minute exercise in a day, how it can buy them 2 hours really at the end of the day of extra able to perform and do whatever you need to do. It doesn't happen immediately, but it does start happening within 6 weeks. Exercise gives you the quickest benefit. All these changes that I'm talking about over here, remember I said you got to give it 12 weeks. To re-nourish somebody, to turn around inflammation, to get the mitochondria back up and rolling, takes time. So worth it though. I pulled a slide from a couple of years ago because I liked it. And I sometimes get, what are the most important, just objective markers that are really important for measuring some of the things that I discussed about. Inflammation with your blood, homocysteine levels. That measures the methylation. That measures how well we are detoxifying. Really important. It's an inflammatory marker. And phase angle on the BIA. That's a direct measurement of mitochondrial function. Insulin resistance, you can measure with hemoglobin A1C. That's something we do right here. And hemoglobin A1C is a 3-month report card of how well you have been doing with sugar levels and how much damage and inflammation it's given on your body. Hemoglobin A1C can also be a predictor of autoimmune disease, because if it rises too high, you will get autoimmune disease. Most autoimmune diseases can be measured a decade before it happens. A decade. Preventative medicine in this country is detecting a disease early on in its being. In other words, get a colonoscopy so we can catch colon cancer before it gets out of hand. I say phooey to that. Let's work on it the 10 years before it happens, because there's plenty of warning signs before it happens. Does that make sense? That is not preventative medicine. That is just trying to get you into medical care earlier. You have to work way earlier than that. Triglycerides is a very strong indicator of insulin resistance. Fasting insulin levels is the gold standard, and fasting insulin levels, it's all over the map, because in this country I've seen some labs consider 35 normal, some others 25 is normal. In the Netherlands, 8 is the cutoff. Canada, 12. Okay, we're way beyond it. And why do we do that? It's because nobody here is normal, so that's the normal. Did you know that blood normals are derived from 1,254 people that don't have a disease? Get a bunch of volunteers every year. What is the average? And those are your normals. Well, guess what? I don't want to be compared to them. Those are not normals. Those are just, I'm getting by kind of values. Don't look at the blood work that way. Yeah, let's be fussier. Blood pressure, fluid retention as measured by the BIA, all very connected to insulin resistance. Your liver and kidneys, there's a compound called GGT, and if it's mildly elevated, just mildly elevated, so I'm talking over 20, this is a real problem, because your chance of diabetes is going to go through the roof. Thailand right now, Cambodia and Vietnam have an incredible explosion of diabetes, and these folks are skinny, they're active, they still have the same work style that they always have had, but their groundwater has become contaminated. So the liver enzymes are going up, diabetes is going through the roof. Diabetes is not just a sugar disease, is it? It's a toxicity inflammation disease. Part of the problem that we're seeing in this nation. China, by the way, is having the same problem. And uric acid. Hormonal levels is a whole thyroid profile, and just TSH alone, like a lot of ordinary doctors are doing, TSH tells you nothing. It's a very tiny sliver of thyroid health. You've got to go with T3, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, and thyroid antibodies to really get an idea what the thyroid is doing. And even that is incomplete, but that's all we can do. And saliva testing for hormonal issues. And muscle mass, that big one. Put it on last, but it is one of the most important. So how do we keep this thing rolling? So there's this extra push that I talked about in the beginning to affect whatever your deficit is. But once we are doing pretty well on that, how do we achieve maintenance? This is a critical part, because too many people yo-yo. Part of the reason they yo-yo, they don't address the inflammation, the mitochondrial fatigue, the hormonal health, right? They're just depriving themselves of calories, which forces some things to happen, but we all know it bounces back up and it goes to a higher level than before, which is the incredible frustration. How do we achieve maintenance? Well, keep, to some degree, supporting your weak spot, whatever it is. Number 2, the food you eat has to be real. A lot of people, there's a lot of complicated recipes out there. Don't. Great for Thanksgiving, but a lot of work. I don't have that kind of time. Right? Grab something green, saute it. Maybe a lean protein of some sort. Get the colors going. Don and Jamie in our health coaching division are more than happy to help you out if you're saying, oh, I don't know where to start. Because I am constantly being blamed for being too simplistic there, right? So, but honestly, the principles are simple. There's no denying that. Eat what God created, not what man created. So, make sure that your digestive tract is working. Take care of that microbiome. Yeah? If you are over 50, make sure you're taking a digestive enzyme of some sort. It makes a huge difference for health and for inflammation, for obesity. And if your hormones are not balanced, it's not going to work. You've got to balance your hormones. I am seeing an epidemic of women 45 and up not sleeping at night, waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning. Their adrenals are just stressed, which means that their sugar levels are going up and down. Their moods, brain fog, I'm hearing it all the time. And hormones, they feel like, doc, even though I don't have my period anymore, I'm having PMS all the time, right? They're very unbalanced by today's society. We gotta yank those hormones back on track, and it's absolutely critical. Toxicity is the main challenge that all of us are experiencing. There's not one of us that escapes it. Some of us have better detoxifying ability than others. Blessed and cursed by it, because those are blessed with better detoxification ability get less feedback from the bodies. And these are the ones that we all know drank like a fish in college, seemed to ace every exam in spite of that, always looked good. And then you meet them at 50 and say, what happened there? Because they never got the feedback immediately. And they're the ones that often die of a heart attack between 50 and 60. Yeah, or a stroke. So toxicity is an important one. Work with it. Without the right amount of sleep, you will not lose weight. It affects your adrenals, your hormones. Sleep is critical. No late night shows. No TV, period, an hour before you go to sleep. No screen time. It affects your melatonin levels like there's no tomorrow, which is your sleep hormone. Make sure you have a routine in place. Okay? Happiness and health is derived from the rhythm of life. And we are just being torn this way, this way, this way. I could not believe when I first moved in from the Netherlands here. And I said, really? The grocery store is open at 10 at night? That's unbelievable. So I went there just to check it out. Is there anybody there? And to my amazement and horror, I saw little kids running around in the store. What are they doing here? They should be in bed at 7:30 or 8. Welcome to the American way. It is a recipe for disaster. A rhythm of life is absolutely critical. May seem boring. It's not. It's what gives us decreased stress. And that is absolutely critical. Exercise, we covered, important component. So achieving maintenance, get real. Eat real food. Plan what you know is sustainable. And let's just do it. Be tough on yourself. Because change is hard. No one has time, but you don't have time to be ill. And what you think is saving you time and is maybe cheap economically is actually costing you big time and is incredibly expensive. So let's make 2016 the year of change. You will benefit, so will your family and everybody around you. It's absolutely huge, and I think you owe it to yourselves as well as those around you.